The fever had already stolen 3 days from Delilah Easton's life. When the ranch hand found her collapsed beside the creek bed, her lips cracked and bleeding, her dress soaked through with sweat despite the autumn chill settling over Apache Junction, Arizona in October of 1883. Nathan Zeller had been tracking a missing calf when he spotted what he first mistook for a heap of discarded clothing near the cottonwoods. His bay mare nickered nervously as he dismounted, and that was when he saw the shallow rise and fall of breathing. He dropped to his knees beside her, pressing the back of his hand to her forehead and jerking it away at the burning heat radiating from her skin. Her eyes fluttered open for just a moment, glassy and unfocused, and she tried to speak, but only a dry rasp emerged from her throat. Nathan did not hesitate. He gathered her into his arms, surprised at how light she felt, how fragile her frame seemed beneath the layers of dusty calico. She was young, maybe 22 or 23, with dark hair that had come loose from its pins and now hung in tangled waves across his arm. Her face, even ravaged by fever and exposure, held a delicate beauty that made something in his chest tighten with an emotion he could not name. He whistled for his mare, who trotted over obediently, and with considerable effort he managed to mount while holding the unconscious woman against his chest. His ranch was closer than town, only about 2 miles northeast, and he knew she would not survive the longer journey to find the doctor. Nathan urged his horse into a steady canter, cradling the woman close to shield her from the jolting movement as much as possible. The ride seemed to take hours, though it could not have been more than 15 minutes. The sun was beginning its descent toward the jagged peaks of the Superstition Mountains, painting the desert in shades of amber and rust. Nathan's ranch house came into view, a modest structure of adobe and timber that he had built himself 3 years ago when he was 23 and full of dreams about making something of the land his father had left him. Now at 26, those dreams had settled into the steady rhythm of hard work and solitude. He kicked open the front door and carried the woman directly to his bedroom, the only proper bed in the house. He laid her down as gently as he could on the patchwork quilt his mother had made before she died. The woman's breathing was rapid and shallow, her skin burning hot to the touch. Nathan had seen fever before, had nursed his father through pneumonia 2 winters before the old man's heart finally gave out, and he knew the signs were bad. He started a fire in the stove and set water to boil, then returned to her side with a basin of cool water and clean cloths. Her dress was filthy and damp, and he knew leaving her in it would only make things worse. With clinical efficiency born of necessity rather than experience, he undid the buttons and hooks, averting his eyes as much as possible while he worked to preserve her modesty. He found a clean cotton nightshirt of his own and managed to get her into it, then pulled the quilt up to her chin. For the next hour he worked steadily, bathing her face and arms with cool water, trying to bring down the fever. She stirred occasionally, mumbling incoherent words that might have been names or prayers once she opened her eyes and looked directly at him, and he saw they were a startling shade of green, like new spring grass after rain. "Where?" she whispered, the single word taking enormous effort. "You are safe," Nathan said, his voice gentle despite its natural roughness. "You are at my ranch, just outside Apache Junction. I found you by the creek. Do you remember what happened?" But her eyes had already closed again, and she turned her head restlessly on the pillow. Nathan dipped the cloth back in the cool water and laid it across her forehead. He had no idea who she was or where she had come from. Apache Junction was a small town, barely more than a wide spot in the road, with a general store, a saloon, a hotel, and a scattering of houses and ranches spreading out into the desert. He knew most of the families by sight, if not by name, and he had never seen this woman before. As darkness fell, Nathan lit a lamp and moved it to the bedside table. He pulled a wooden chair close and settled in to keep watch. The fever showed no signs of breaking. If anything, she seemed worse, her skin even hotter, her breathing more labored. He continued bathing her face and arms, changing the cloths frequently, talking to her in low tones, though he doubted she could hear him. "You have got to fight this," he told her as midnight approached. "I do not even know your name, but I can tell you are a fighter. Nobody ends up alone by a creek bed in the middle of nowhere unless they have been through something hard. So whatever strength got you that far, you dig deep and find it again." He dozed fitfully in the chair as the night wore on, waking every time she stirred or cried out. Twice she thrashed so violently he had to hold her shoulders to keep her from falling out of the bed. Her nightshirt became soaked with sweat, and he changed it for another of his shirts, working quickly and efficiently in the lamplight. Dawn was just beginning to gray the windows when she finally went still, her breathing evening out into something deeper and more natural. Nathan pressed his hand to her forehead and felt the first hint that the fever might be breaking. Relief flooded through him so powerfully that his hands shook as he wrung out another cloth. He kept up his vigilance through the morning, and by the time full daylight streamed through the bedroom window, he was certain she had turned a corner. Her skin was still warm but no longer burning, and the flush had faded from her cheeks, leaving her pale but peaceful. He left her sleeping and went to tend to the animals, moving through his morning chores with the mechanical efficiency of long practice. He fed and watered his horses, checked on the cattle in the near pasture, gathered eggs from the hen house. His body performed the familiar tasks while his mind remained in that bedroom, puzzling over the mystery of the woman sleeping in his bed. When he returned to the house 2 hours later, he found her awake, propped up slightly on the pillows and looking around the unfamiliar room with confusion and fear clear on her face. She turned toward him as he entered, and he saw her hand clutch the quilt tighter to her chest. "Easy," he said, stopping in the doorway to give her space. "You are safe here. My name is Nathan Zeller. I found you collapsed by the creek yesterday afternoon. You have been burning with fever." She studied him for a long moment, and he bore her scrutiny patiently. He knew what she would see: a tall man with dark hair that needed cutting, several days of stubble on his jaw, work-worn clothes, and the weathered face of someone who spent most of his time outdoors. He was not a handsome man by any stretch, his features too rough and angular for that, but he had been told his eyes were kind. "Delilah," she said finally, her voice hoarse and weak. "Delilah Easton." "Pleased to make your acquaintance, Miss Easton, though I wish it were under better circumstances. How are you feeling?" "Terrible," she admitted, and he saw the hint of a smile ghost across her lips. "But better than I was, I think. I do not remember much after leaving town. I was trying to get to my uncle's ranch, but I got turned around." "Where is your uncle's place?" "North of here, maybe 10 miles. The double E spread. Edmund Easton." Nathan nodded slowly. He knew the ranch by reputation, though he had never met the owner. It was one of the larger operations in the area, running several hundred head of cattle across the desert grasslands. "I will send word to him that you are here and safe," Nathan said, "but right now you need rest and food. When did you last eat?" Delilah's brow furrowed. "I am not certain. 2 days ago, maybe 3. I left Tucson 5 days ago on the stage. There was an accident, the wheel broke, and we overturned. The driver was hurt badly. I tried to help him, but there was so much blood." Her voice cracked, and she closed her eyes. "The other passengers took the horses to go for help. They said they would send someone back, but I could not wait. The driver died, and I could not stay there with him like that, so I started walking." Nathan's jaw tightened. "They left you alone out there with a dying man?" "There were only 2 horses and 3 other passengers. It made sense for them to go together." But he could hear the hurt beneath her practical words, the betrayal of being abandoned. "I am going to make you some broth," he said, keeping his anger at the unknown passengers out of his voice. "You need to get your strength back, and then you are going to rest. Your uncle's ranch is not going anywhere, and you are in no condition to travel." He left her and busied himself in the kitchen, heating up the beef broth he had made a few days earlier and cutting thin slices of bread. When he returned to the bedroom with a tray, he found Delilah had managed to sit up more fully, though the effort had clearly cost her. Her face was pale and drawn, and she looked even younger and more vulnerable in his oversized nightshirt with her dark hair tumbling around her shoulders. Nathan set the tray across her lap and stepped back, giving her privacy to eat, but her hands shook so badly when she tried to lift the spoon that broth slopped over the side of the bowl. Without thinking, he moved forward and took the spoon from her hand. "Let me help," he said quietly. For a moment he thought she would refuse, pride warring with practicality in her expression. But then she sagged back against the pillows and nodded. Nathan sat on the edge of the bed and carefully spooned broth between her lips, waiting patiently while she swallowed each mouthful. It was an intimate act, feeding her like this, and he found himself acutely aware of every detail, the way her lips parted to accept the spoon, the slender column of her throat as she swallowed, the way her green eyes watched him with a mixture of gratitude and wariness. "Thank you," she whispered, when she had managed half the bowl and could not take any more. "For everything. For finding me, for taking care of me. I would have died out there." Any decent person would have done the same, Nathan said, though he wondered if that was true. This was hard country, and it bred hard people. Not everyone would have taken in a stranger, especially a young woman who brought complications just by her presence. "Will you tell me about yourself?" Delilah asked as he set the tray aside. "It seems only fair since I'm in your home, wearing your clothes, sleeping in your bed." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Not much to tell. I am a rancher, have been for 3 years now on my own, though I grew up working cattle with my father. He left me this land when he died, about 200 acres. I run a small herd, do some horse trading, get by well enough." "No wife?" The question was bold, but her fever-weakened state seemed to have stripped away some of the usual social niceties. "No wife. No family at all anymore. My mother died when I was 15, my father 3 years ago. I've always been better with animals than people, I suppose." Something flickered in her eyes, understanding perhaps, or recognition of a kindred loneliness. "I have been alone too since my parents died last year. Yellow fever took them both within a week of each other in Tucson. My uncle Edmund is my only living relative, which is why I was traveling to his ranch. He wrote and offered me a home and a position as his housekeeper." "I am sorry for your loss," Nathan said, and meant it. He knew the peculiar ache of being untethered from family, adrift in a world that seemed to expect everyone to have someone. Delilah's eyes were growing heavy again, the brief conversation having exhausted her remaining strength. Nathan stood and pulled the quilt higher around her shoulders. "Sleep now. We can talk more later." She was asleep before he reached the door. Nathan spent the rest of the day working around the ranch, but he checked on her frequently. Each time he looked in, she was sleeping peacefully, and each time he felt that strange tightness in his chest ease just a little. He told himself it was simply relief that she was recovering, that any person would feel the same satisfaction at having saved a life. But he knew even then that it was something more. That evening, he made a simple supper of beans and bacon and brought a plate to her. She was awake and looking much improved, some color back in her cheeks and more clarity in her eyes. She managed to feed herself this time, though he stayed nearby in case she needed help. They talked as she ate, easy conversation about small things, the weather and the ranch and the town. Nathan found himself telling her things he had not spoken aloud in years, about his dreams for expanding his herd, about the wild horses he had seen in the mountains, about the time a rattlesnake had gotten into his kitchen, and he had spent an hour coaxing it out with a broom handle. Delilah laughed at that story, a sound like water over stones, bright and clear. "You did not just shoot it? And put a hole in my floor? No, thank you. Besides, the snake was not doing anything wrong, just got confused about where it belonged, seemed only right to give it a chance to leave peaceable." "You are a kind man, Nathan Zeller," she said softly, and something in the way she said his name made his pulse quicken. He cleared his throat and stood, collecting her empty plate. "You should rest more. I will be right outside if you need anything." That night Nathan made himself a bedroll on the floor of the main room, though sleep came slowly. He kept thinking about Delilah in the next room, about the trust in her eyes when she looked at him, about how natural it had felt to care for her. He had been alone for so long that he had almost forgotten what it was like to have someone else in his space, to hear another person's breathing, to feel responsible for someone's well-being. It should have felt like a burden, but instead it felt like coming home. The next 3 days fell into a rhythm. Nathan tended the ranch during the day while Delilah rested and slowly regained her strength. He brought her meals, and they talked for hours, discovering they had more in common than seemed possible for two people who had lived such different lives. She told him about growing up in Tucson, about her father who had been a school teacher, and her mother who had painted beautiful watercolors of the desert flowers. He told her about learning to rope cattle when he was 6 years old, about the time he had stayed up for 3 days straight helping a mare through a difficult birth, about the loneliness of the past 3 years. "Why did you never marry?" Delilah asked on the 4th morning as she sat in a chair by the window, dressed now in her own clothes that Nathan had carefully washed and mended. She was still pale, but growing stronger by the hour, and he knew it would not be long before he would need to take her to her uncle's ranch. The thought filled him with an emptiness he did not want to examine too closely. "Never found the right woman, I suppose," he said, leaning against the door frame with his coffee cup in hand. "Most girls around here want a man with more prospects than a small ranch and a string of half-wild horses. And the ones who might have overlooked that, well, I never felt that spark with them. My father always said when you know, that it hits you like lightning and there is no mistaking it. And you never felt that lightning?" Her green eyes were steady on his face, and he had the unsettling sensation that she could see right through him. "Not until recently," he admitted quietly. The air between them seemed to thicken and spark with unspoken words. Delilah looked away first, color rising in her cheeks that had nothing to do with fever. "I should go to my uncle's ranch soon. I have imposed on your hospitality long enough." "You have not imposed," Nathan said, perhaps too quickly. "But yes, I imagine your uncle is worried. I'll take you tomorrow if you're feeling up to the ride. Thank you for everything." She turned back to him, and he saw emotions swirling in her eyes that matched the tumult in his own chest. "These past few days being here with you, it has been the most peaceful I have felt since my parents died. You have been so kind, so patient. I will not forget it." "Delilah," he started, then stopped, not knowing how to put into words what he was feeling. How did you tell a woman you had known for less than a week that she had somehow become essential to you? That the thought of taking her to her uncle's ranch and possibly never seeing her again made him feel like the ground was crumbling beneath his feet. Before he could find the words, she stood and crossed to him, moving slowly but steadily. She reached out and placed her hand over his where it gripped the coffee cup. Her touch was warm and soft, and he felt it all the way through his body like an electric current. "I know," she said simply. "I feel it too." Nathan set down the coffee cup and took both her hands in his, marveling at how small they were, how delicate her bones felt beneath his calloused palms. "I have no right to ask this when you have only just recovered, when you are meant to go to your uncle. But Delilah, I cannot let you leave without telling you that these past days with you have meant more to me than I can properly say. You have brought life back to this house, to me. I know it is too soon and too fast, but I need you to know that I have feelings for you, deep ones." Her eyes glistened with tears, but she was smiling. "It is too soon and too fast," she agreed. "By all reasonable measures, we should be practical and sensible. I should go to my uncle's ranch and take up my position there. You should go back to your solitary life. We should forget about these few strange days outside of normal time." "But," his heart hammered against his ribs, "but I do not want to be practical or sensible. I spent my whole life being the good daughter, doing what was expected, following the proper path, and then my parents died, and I realized how short life can be, how quickly everything you love can be taken away. When those passengers left me alone in that overturned stage, when I thought I might die out there in the desert, all I could think was that I had never really lived, never taken a risk, never followed my heart. She squeezed his hands tighter. "Nathan, my heart is telling me to stay here with you." He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her carefully, still mindful of her recent illness. She rested her head against his chest, and he felt the rightness of it settle into his bones. They stood like that for a long time, just holding each other as morning light filled the room with gold. "We still need to tell your uncle," Nathan said eventually. "He is expecting you, and he deserves to know you are safe. But we will go together, and we will explain the situation. If he is any kind of decent man, he will understand." Delilah nodded against his chest. "And if he does not?" "Then we will figure it out together. I am not letting you go, Delilah Easton. Not now that I have found you." The next morning they set out for the Double E Ranch, Delilah riding one of Nathan's gentle mares while he rode his bay. The October air was crisp and clear, the sky an endless blue arch overhead. They followed the old wagon road north, riding side by side when the terrain allowed it, talking and laughing like old friends rather than new acquaintances. Nathan pointed out landmarks, the distinctive peak where eagles nested, the dry wash that turned into a raging river during monsoon season, the cluster of saguaro cacti that looked like a gathering of sentinels. The Double E Ranch was impressive, sprawling across a wide valley with a large adobe house at its center surrounded by numerous outbuildings and corrals. Cattle dotted the grasslands as far as Nathan could see, and he counted at least a dozen hands working various tasks around the property. This was not just a ranch. It was an empire, and he felt a flutter of anxiety about how a man who commanded such wealth and power would react to his niece's unexpected change of plans. They rode up to the main house and dismounted. Before they could knock, the door swung open and a tall, silver-haired man stepped out onto the porch. He was probably in his late 50s, with a lined face that spoke of years in the harsh sun and eyes that were a paler shade of the same green as Delilah's. "Delilah?" Edmund Easton's voice was rough with confusion and concern. "Good God, child, where have you been? The stage line sent word about the accident days ago. They said you had wandered off and they could not find you. I have had men searching everywhere." "I am sorry, Uncle Edmund," Delilah said, moving toward him. "I got lost trying to find my way here, and then I fell ill. This is Nathan Zeller. He found me and saved my life." Edmund's sharp gaze moved to Nathan, assessing him in a single sweep. Nathan met his eyes steadily, refusing to be intimidated despite the difference in their circumstances. "Then I owe you a debt, Mr. Zeller," Edmund said, coming down the steps to shake Nathan's hand. His grip was firm, and his eyes were sincere. "Thank you for taking care of my niece. Please, both of you, come inside. You must be tired from the ride." They followed him into the house, which was furnished with surprising elegance for a ranch in the middle of the Arizona desert. A Mexican housekeeper brought coffee and pastries, and they sat in a spacious parlor with large windows overlooking the valley. Edmund listened intently as Delilah recounted the accident and her subsequent ordeal, his face growing darker as she described being left alone with the dying driver. "Cowards," he muttered when she finished. "I will be having words with the stage line about their employees, but thank God you were found, and by a good man." He looked at Nathan again. "I mean that sincerely, Mr. Zeller. Not every man would have taken such care with a stranger." "Call me Nathan, please, and your niece is easy to care for." Something in his tone made Edmund's eyes sharpen with interest. He looked between them, noting details that Nathan had not even realized were visible, the way they sat close together, the way Delilah's eyes kept finding Nathan's face, the protective angle of Nathan's body toward her. "I see," Edmund said slowly. "Well, this is an interesting development." Delilah sat forward, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Uncle Edmund, I know you offered me a position here as your housekeeper, and I am so grateful for that kindness. But circumstances have changed. Nathan and I, we have developed feelings for each other. Strong feelings. I know it seems impossible, given how short a time we have known each other, but it is real and true. I want to stay with him." Edmund was quiet for a long moment, his weathered face unreadable. Nathan felt tension coiling in his shoulders, preparing for an argument or worse, But then the older man smiled, a slow, spreading warmth that transformed his stern features. "Do you know what your aunt, God rest her soul, used to say to me?" Edmund asked, looking at Delilah. "She said that true love is not about time. It is about recognition. She said that some souls know each other on sight, that they have been waiting their whole lives to meet. I met her on a Tuesday and proposed on Friday, and we had 32 happy years together before the influenza took her. So no, child, I do not think it is impossible at all." Relief flooded through Nathan so powerfully his hands shook. Delilah's eyes filled with tears, and she stood to embrace her uncle, who held her tightly and stroked her hair like she was still a little girl. "But," Edmund said, pulling back to look at her seriously, "I want to know that this is what you truly want, not just gratitude or circumstance. Nathan seems like a good man, but good men are not always the right men. Are you certain?" "I am certain," Delilah said without hesitation, "more certain than I have ever been of anything." Edmund turned to Nathan. "And you? What are your intentions toward my niece?" Nathan stood, meeting the older man's eyes directly. "I intend to marry her if she will have me. I intend to build a life with her, to care for her and protect her, and do everything in my power to make her happy. I do not have much to offer compared to what you could give her, but what I have is hers." "What do you have?" Edmund asked. "Edmund, 200 acres, a small herd, good water rights, and a house I built with my own hands. It is not fancy, but it is solid, and it is mine, free and clear. I work hard and I am honest. I will never be a rich man, but we will never go hungry either." Edmund studied him for another long moment, then nodded decisively. "That is more than enough. A man who built his own home and works his own land is worth 10 silver spoon dandies. You have my blessing, Nathan. And more than that, you have my support. I know how hard it is to build up a ranch from nothing. Let me help you both get started properly." "I cannot accept charity," Nathan started, but Edmund waved him off. "Not charity, family. Delilah is my blood, and soon you will be too. Let me do this. Consider it her dowry if that makes it easier to swallow. Every bride deserves a proper start." They talked for another hour, making plans. Edmund insisted on hosting a wedding at the ranch in 2 weeks' time, giving them time to spread the word and prepare properly. He offered Nathan breeding stock to improve his herd and timber and supplies to expand the house. Nathan's pride warred with his practicality, but Delilah's hand in his and the genuine warmth in Edmund's eyes eventually won out. He accepted the help with gratitude, knowing it would make their lives significantly easier. As they prepared to leave, Edmund pulled Nathan aside while Delilah spoke with the housekeeper about wedding preparations. "I meant what I said about you being a good man," Edmund said quietly. "But I want you to know that if you ever hurt her, if you ever make her regret choosing you, you will answer to me. She has been through enough pain in her young life. She deserves happiness now." "I intend to give her exactly that," Nathan said. "You have my word." They rode back to Nathan's ranch in the golden afternoon light, both of them quiet but in a companionable way that needed no words. When they arrived home, Delilah looked at the modest adobe house with new eyes, seeing not what it was, but what it could become, their home. That evening they sat together on the porch, watching the sunset behind the mountains in a blaze of orange and purple. Nathan had his arm around Delilah's shoulders, and she was tucked against his side, fitting there like she had been made for that exact spot. "Tell me about the wedding you want," Nathan said. "I know your uncle is planning something big, but what do you want?" Delilah was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I want it to be real and meaningful, not just a show. I want the people who care about us to be there. Not strangers making social obligations. I want to stand in front of everyone and promise to love you for the rest of my life, and I want to mean every word." "That sounds perfect to me." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her hair, soap, and sunshine, and something uniquely her. "These 2 weeks are going to feel like an eternity." "We have plenty to keep us busy," Delilah said practically. If we are going to make this house fit for a married couple, we have work to do. I noticed the kitchen could use some organization, and those curtains have seen better days, and we should probably build an actual guest room instead of you sleeping on the floor." Nathan laughed. "Yes, madam. I can see you're going to keep me on my toes." "Someone has to." She tilted her head back to look at him, her green eyes serious now. "Nathan, I want you to know that I am not expecting you to change who you are for me. I fell in love with a cowboy who lives simply and works hard and cares more about doing right than looking impressive. I do not want a different life than that." "What if I want to give you more? You could have had comfort at your uncle's ranch, safety and security without having to work so hard. Instead, you are choosing a rancher's wife life, which means early mornings and physical labor and lean times when the cattle do not sell well." "I am choosing you," Delilah corrected firmly. "Everything else is just details. Besides, I am not afraid of hard work. My mother ran our household on a teacher's salary and made it look easy. She taught me how to stretch a dollar and make something beautiful from nothing. I can do this. Nathan, I want to do this." He kissed her then, slow and sweet, pouring all his feelings into it. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard and Delilah's cheeks were flush pink. 2 weeks, she murmured. "It really is going to feel like forever." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. True to his word, Edmund sent over wagons loaded with supplies, lumber for expanding the house, cattle to add to Nathan's herd, even furniture and household goods. Nathan hired 2 of Edmund's ranch hands to help with the construction, and they worked from dawn to dusk, adding a second bedroom, expanding the kitchen, and building a proper barn to replace the leaning structure that had been making do. Delilah threw herself into making the house a home. She sewed new curtains from fabric Edmund sent, painted the walls a warm cream color, organized the kitchen with efficient practicality, and planted a small garden near the house with herbs and vegetables. Nathan would come in from working on the construction, covered in sawdust and sweat, and find her covered in flour from baking or dirt from gardening, and his heart would swell with something so powerful it almost hurt. They were never alone during those weeks, always surrounded by workers or visited by Edmund checking on preparations or the ranch women who had somehow learned about the upcoming wedding and descended with advice and offers of help. But Nathan and Delilah stole moments together, walking by the creek in the evenings, sitting on the porch after everyone had left, talking about everything and nothing until the stars came out. "I have been thinking about names," Delilah said one evening about a week before the wedding. They were sitting side by side on the new porch steps, their shoulders touching. "Names for what?" "Children." She said it simply, but he heard the uncertainty beneath the word. "I mean, if we are blessed with them. I know we have not talked about it, but I wanted you to know that I hope we have a family someday." Nathan took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "I hope so too. I always figured I would die a bachelor, but now that I have you, I keep imagining a house full of life. Kids running around, teaching them to ride, watching you rock a baby to sleep. It is a good dream." "My mother used to say that children are what make a house a home," Delilah said softly. "After she and my father died, their house felt so empty, like all the life had been drained out of it. I do not want that for us. I want noise and mess and love everywhere." "Then that is what we will have." He squeezed her hand. "As many babies as God sees fit to bless us with, and we will love every one of them." "Even if the first one is a boy and he is as stubborn as you?" "Especially then." Nathan grinned. "Though I pity you if we have a daughter with your determination. Between the 2 of us, these kids do not stand a chance of being anything other than completely hard-headed." Delilah laughed, the sound echoing across the desert evening. "We are going to be a handful, are we not? The very best kind." The wedding day arrived with perfect autumn weather, cool and clear with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of sage across the valley. Edmund's ranch had been transformed, with garlands strung between the posts of the main corral, tables set up laden with food, and chairs arranged in neat rows facing a simple wooden arch decorated with wildflowers. Nathan stood beneath that arch in his best clothes, which were not much but were clean and pressed, his dark hair slicked back and his jaw freshly shaved. His hands trembled slightly as he watched the small crowd gather. Faces he recognized from town and the surrounding ranches, people he had known for years but never gotten particularly close to. Edmund stood beside him, having agreed to serve as his best man, and the older man clapped him on the shoulder reassuringly. "Breathe, son," Edmund said with a smile. "She is not going to change her mind. I know. I just keep waiting to wake up and find out this was all a dream. I felt the same way at my wedding, but I promise you this is real." Then the crowd quieted and turned, and Nathan's breath caught in his throat. Delilah appeared at the far end of the aisle wearing a simple cream-colored dress that her mother had been married in, carefully preserved and altered to fit her slender frame. Her dark hair was pinned up with small white flowers woven through it, and she carried a bouquet of desert blooms. But it was her face that undid him completely, radiant with joy and love and absolute certainty as she walked toward him. She had no father to give her away, so she walked alone, her head held high and her green eyes locked on Nathan's face. When she reached him, he took both her hands in his, and they stood facing each other while the local minister began the ceremony. Nathan barely heard the words being spoken. He was too focused on Delilah, on committing every detail to memory, the light catching in her hair, the slight tremor in her fingers, the smile that curved her lips. When it came time for the vows, Nathan spoke his clearly and firmly, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "I, Nathan Zeller, take you, Delilah Easton, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, honor you, protect you, and cherish you for all the days of my life. You brought light back into my darkness, and I swear I will spend every day trying to be worthy of the gift you have given me." Delilah's eyes glistened with tears as she spoke her own vows. "I, Delilah Easton, take you, Nathan Zeller, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you, honor you, stand beside you, and build a life with you. You saved me in more ways than one, and I choose you every day for the rest of my life. By the power vested in me by the territory of Arizona, I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister said. "You may kiss your bride." Nathan cupped Delilah's face in his hands and kissed her softly, sweetly, while the crowd erupted in applause and cheers. And when they pulled apart, both of them were grinning like fools, and Nathan felt happiness so complete it seemed impossible that one person could contain it all. The celebration that followed was joyous and loud, with music and dancing and more food than Nathan had seen in one place outside of a county fair. He danced with Delilah, spinning her around until she was breathless and laughing, then watched with amusement as she was claimed for dances by Edmund and several of the ranch hands who had helped build their house. Every time she passed by him, she would reach out to touch his hand or catch his eye, and he knew she was feeling the same thing he was, that sense of rightness, of pieces falling into place. As evening fell and the party showed no signs of slowing, Nathan caught Delilah's hand and pulled her away from the crowd. They slipped into the growing darkness, walking hand in hand toward the corral, where their horses waited already saddled with their bedrolls and supplies tied behind. "Should we say goodbye?" Delilah asked, though she made no move to go back. "I told Edmund we were leaving. He will make our excuses." Nathan helped her mount, then swung up onto his own horse. "I want to get home, Mrs. Zeller, our home." The ride back to the ranch took less than an hour, the horses knowing the way even in the dark. The house looked different when they arrived, golden lamplight glowing in the windows that Nathan had left burning before he departed that morning. It looked like a home, warm and welcoming, waiting for them. Nathan helped Delilah down from her horse, and they stood for a moment in the yard, wrapped in each other's arms and the soft desert night. "Are you happy?" Nathan asked, even though he could see the answer in her face. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Delilah said. "Take me inside, husband." He swept her up into his arms, making her squeal with surprise and laughter, and carried her over the threshold of their home. The door swung shut behind them, closing out the world and sealing them into their own private haven. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm of work and love and quiet contentment. Nathan and Delilah worked side by side during the days, tending the expanded herd, improving the ranch, planting more crops. Delilah proved to be as capable as she had claimed, fearless about learning new skills and tackling hard work. She learned to rope and brand, to ride fences and check water tanks, to shoot a rifle and treat sick cattle. Nathan taught her everything patiently, marveling at her quick mind and determination. In the evenings, they would sit together and talk about their days, make plans for the future, dream about the life they were building. Sometimes Edmund would ride over for supper, and the three of them would sit around the table like a real family, sharing stories and laughter. Nathan had not realized how much he had missed that sense of belonging until he had it again. Winter came to the desert, bringing cold nights and occasional dustings of snow on the mountain peaks. Nathan and Delilah huddled close under heavy quilts, talking quietly in the darkness about everything and nothing. It was during one of those conversations, about 3 months after their wedding, that Delilah took his hand and pressed it against her still flat stomach. "I think we're going to have a baby," she whispered. Nathan's heart seemed to stop and then restart, beating double time. "You are certain?" "Not completely certain, but I am fairly sure. I have missed my monthly courses twice now, and I have been feeling sick in the mornings. Mrs. Patterson from the general store said those were the signs." He pulled her close, his hand still resting on her stomach where their child was growing. "A baby," he breathed. "Delilah, we are going to have a baby." She was crying and laughing at the same time, her face pressed against his chest. "Are you happy?" "I know it is soon. We have only been married a few months." "Happy does not even begin to cover it." Nathan tilted her face up so he could see her eyes in the moonlight filtering through the window. "You have given me everything I never knew I needed. A home, a family, a purpose beyond just surviving day to day. I love you so much it scares me sometimes." "I love you too," Delilah said. "So much that I cannot imagine what my life was before you. It feels like I was just going through the motions, waiting without knowing what I was waiting for. And then you found me by that creek, and everything changed." They lay awake for hours that night, making plans and dreaming about the future. Would it be a boy or a girl? Would the baby have Nathan's dark hair or Delilah's green eyes? What kind of parents would they be? The questions and possibilities seemed endless and wonderful. The pregnancy progressed normally, though Delilah's morning sickness lasted well into the 4th month and left her exhausted and miserable. Nathan took over more of the physical work around the ranch, insisting she rest even though she chafed at being coddled. Edmund visited frequently, bringing gifts for the baby and checking on Delilah with the concerned care of a father figure. Spring arrived in a riot of wildflowers covering the desert floor, and Delilah's stomach swelled with their growing child. Nathan found himself unable to stop touching her belly, amazed by the life moving beneath his palm. The first time he felt the baby kick, he nearly wept, overwhelmed by the reality of it all. "That is our child," he said wonderingly. "That is our baby moving around in there." Delilah laughed, her hand covering his. "Very active, this one. I think we are going to have our hands full." Summer brought intense heat, and Delilah grew large and uncomfortable, struggling with the weight of the baby and the temperature. Nathan rigged up a system to keep the house cooler and insisted she stay inside during the hottest part of the day. He hired a ranch hand to help with the work, a young man named Tom who was reliable and hardworking, freeing Nathan to spend more time close to the house. In early August, on a morning when the heat was already building despite the early hour, Delilah's water broke. Nathan sent Tom racing to fetch the midwife from town while he helped Delilah to the bedroom and tried not to panic. The midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Ross who had delivered half the babies in the county, arrived within 2 hours and took charge with calm efficiency. Nathan was banished to the main room where he paced and worried and listened to the sounds coming from the bedroom. Delilah cried out during the contractions, and each sound felt like a knife to his heart. Edmund arrived sometime in the afternoon, having heard the news from Tom, and sat with Nathan, providing silent support. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, a new sound filled the house, a baby's cry, lusty and strong, announcing arrival into the world. Nathan was on his feet and moving toward the bedroom before he even realized it, but Mrs. Ross met him at the door. "You have a son?" she said, smiling. "A big, healthy boy. And your wife is doing fine, though she is exhausted." Nathan pushed past her gently and crossed to the bed where Delilah lay propped against pillows, her hair damp with sweat, and her face pale but glowing. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket, and as Nathan approached, the baby's eyes opened, dark blue and unfocused, but somehow seeming to look right at him. "Nathan," Delilah said softly, "meet your son." He sat carefully on the edge of the bed and reached out with trembling hands to touch the tiny fist that had worked free of the blanket. The baby's fingers wrapped around his finger with surprising strength, and Nathan felt his heart crack open with love so fierce it took his breath away. "He is perfect," Nathan whispered. "You are perfect. Delilah, you did it. He is here and he is healthy and you are okay." "It was hard," she admitted, her voice shaky with exhaustion. "But worth it. So worth it. What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months but never settled on anything definite. Now, looking at his son's small face, Nathan knew with sudden certainty. "What about Daniel? It means God is my judge. Seems fitting for a boy born in the middle of the desert to parents who found each other against all odds." "Daniel Zeller," Delilah said, testing it out. "I love it. Daniel it is." Edmund was allowed in to meet his great-nephew, and the tough old rancher went suspiciously misty-eyed as he held the baby with surprising gentleness. "He looks like you, Nathan," Edmund said. "Same stubborn chin. This boy is going to keep you on your toes." "I hope so," Nathan said, taking his son back and cradling him close. "I want him to be strong and determined. I want him to know his own mind." "He will also need to be kind and thoughtful like his father," Delilah added. "And brave like his mother," Nathan said, smiling at her. "He comes from good stock on both sides." The first months of Daniel's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and overwhelming love. Nathan discovered he was a natural father, patient with the crying and confident handling the tiny baby. He would walk the floor for hours with Daniel against his shoulder, singing old cowboy songs in his rough voice until the baby settled into sleep. Delilah watched them together and fell in love with her husband all over again, seeing this new side of him. As Daniel grew, the ranch prospered. Nathan's herd increased, his reputation for quality cattle and fair dealing spread, and opportunities for expansion presented themselves. With Edmund's advice and support, Nathan bought another 100 acres adjoining his property, giving them room to grow. They hired more help, building bunkhouses for ranch hands and establishing the kind of operation Nathan had only dreamed about when he was working the land alone. But success never changed who they were at their core. Nathan still worked alongside his men, still got up before dawn to ride fences and check cattle. Delilah still kept the house herself, refusing to hire domestic help despite being able to afford it. She said she liked the work, liked knowing every corner of their home was cared for by her own hands. And every evening, no matter how hard the day had been, they would gather as a family, Nathan and Delilah and Daniel, and share supper and stories and the quiet joy of being together. Daniel grew into a sturdy toddler with his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes, a combination that made him almost painfully beautiful. He was fearless and curious, constantly getting into trouble and needing to be rescued from whatever new adventure he had embarked upon. Nathan swore he was going to go gray before he was 30 from the heart attacks his son regularly inflicted, but he could not have been prouder. When Daniel was 2.5, Delilah discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect. Perhaps because her body had done this before. She remained active longer, working alongside Nathan right up until the last month when he finally put his foot down and insisted she rest. Their daughter was born in the spring, arriving quickly and without the hours of labor that had accompanied Daniel's birth. She was smaller than her brother had been, more delicate, with a cap of dark hair and eyes that would eventually turn the same green as her mother's. They named her Sarah after Nathan's mother, and she was a calm, content baby who rarely cried and seemed to observe the world around her with serious consideration. "She is going to be the smart one," Delilah predicted, watching 3-month-old Sarah track her movements across the room with focused attention. "Daniel is all action and impulse. This one is going to think things through." "God help us if she has your stubborn streak combined with actual planning skills, O'Rear," Nathan said, but he was grinning. "We will never win an argument with her." Life continued its steady progression. The ranch grew into one of the most successful in the region, though never so large that it lost its family feel. Nathan trained Daniel to ride almost as soon as the boy could walk, and by the time he was 5, Daniel could sit a horse well enough to accompany his father on short rides around the property. Sarah followed in her brother's footsteps, though she was more cautious and methodical in her approach to everything. Edmund remained a constant presence in their lives until he passed peacefully in his sleep at the age of 71, when Daniel was 7 and Sarah was 5. The loss hit them all hard, but especially Delilah, who had loved the old man like a father. Nathan held her through her grief, giving her space to mourn while keeping the ranch running and the children cared for. Edmund left his ranch to them, making Nathan and Delilah among the largest landowners in the territory, but they chose to keep the two operations separate, hiring a foreman to run the Double E while they stayed at the home Nathan had built. "This is where our life started," Delilah said when Nathan asked if she wanted to move to the larger, grander house. "This is where you carried me when I was too sick to stand. This is where we fell in love and got married and had our babies. I do not want to leave it." "Then we stay," Nathan said simply. "Everything else is just details." The years passed, marked by small milestones and quiet joys. Daniel grew tall and strong, inheriting his father's way with horses and his mother's head for numbers. Sarah became the ranch's unofficial bookkeeper by the time she was 10, keeping meticulous records and spotting patterns in the cattle prices that helped them maximize profits. Nathan and Delilah watched their children grow with pride and amazement, marveling at the people they were becoming. When Daniel was 12 and Sarah was 10, Delilah announced she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was a surprise, as they had assumed their family was complete, but it was a welcome one. Their third child, a boy they named Michael, was born healthy and strong, and he proved to be a perfect blend of his siblings' personalities, adventurous like Daniel, but thoughtful like Sarah. Nathan was 40 by then. His dark hair shot through with silver at the temples, his face lined from years in the sun, but he felt younger than he had at 26, filled with purpose and love and satisfaction in a life well lived. Delilah was 37, still beautiful, though her figure had softened with childbearing and her own dark hair showed threads of gray. To Nathan, she was more attractive now than she had been at 22, weathered into herself with confidence and strength. They would sit on the porch in the evenings, the same porch where Nathan had proposed, watching their children play in the yard as the sun set behind the mountains. Sometimes Delilah would lean her head on Nathan's shoulder, and they would sit in comfortable silence, needing no words to communicate what they felt. "Do you ever think about that day by the creek?" Delilah asked one such evening, when Michael was playing with a wooden horse Daniel had carved for him and Sarah was reading under a tree. "When you found me?" "All the time," Nathan admitted. "I think about how close I came to never knowing you. If I had gone a different direction tracking that calf, if I had been a few minutes slower, if you had been 100 yards further from where you fell, so many things had to go exactly right for us to find each other." "I think we would have found each other somehow," Delilah said. "I have to believe that. Some things are just meant to be." "Maybe so?" Nathan pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "But I am grateful it happened the way it did. Every day since then has been a gift." even the hard days, when the cattle get sick or the drought hits or the kids are driving us crazy. Especially those days, because we face them together, and that makes all the difference. Delilah turned to look at him, her green eyes soft with emotion. I love you, Nathan Zeller, just as much now as I did the day you carried me to bed and stayed with me through that fever. More even because now I know exactly what kind of man you are, and you have never once disappointed me. I love you too, Nathan said, his voice rough with feeling. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. You and our children, this life we have built. It is everything I never knew to hope for. They sat there as darkness fell, and the stars came out, surrounded by the sounds of their children's laughter and the peaceful quiet of the desert evening. In the distance, cattle lowed and horses nickered in the corrals. The house behind them glowed with lamplight, warm and inviting. Everything they had worked for, everything they had built together, spread out around them in solid, tangible reality. Daniel grew into a fine young man, taking on more and more responsibility around the ranch until he was essentially Nathan's partner rather than just his son. At 22, he married the daughter of a neighboring rancher, a spirited young woman named Catherine, who could rope and ride as well as any man. Their wedding was held at the ranch, and Nathan stood beside his son with his arm around Delilah, both of them misty-eyed as they watched Daniel exchange vows. That was us, Delilah whispered, 21 years ago, standing under that arch at Uncle Edmund's ranch. Best day of my life, Nathan said, until Daniel was born, and then Sarah, and then Michael. I keep thinking I cannot possibly love anything more than I already do, and then something new happens to prove me wrong. Sarah remained at home longer, helping run the ranches and proving to have a genius for business that surpassed even her mother's. She eventually married at 25, choosing a lawyer from Phoenix who was smart enough to appreciate her and secure enough to support her ambitions. They settled in town but visited the ranch frequently, and Sarah remained involved in the family business. Michael followed his own path, developing a passion for breeding horses that led him to travel throughout the Southwest studying different bloodlines and techniques. He returned home at 24 with a wealth of knowledge and began developing a breeding program that would eventually make the Zeller Ranch famous for its quality horses. Through it all, through weddings and grandchildren, and the inevitable challenges that life brought, Nathan and Delilah remained each other's constant. They aged together, their bodies slowing down, but their love only deepening with each passing year. Nathan's dark hair turned fully silver, and Delilah's face lined with laugh lines and crow's feet from decades of smiling. They moved a little slower, worked a little less, but they were still partners in every sense of the word. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a massive celebration. There were nearly 40 people present, family and friends and ranch hands who had become like family over the years. Tables groaned under the weight of food, music filled the air, and children ran wild through the yard while adults talked and laughed. As the sun began to set, Daniel called for quiet and raised his glass in a toast. "To my parents," he said, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd, "who taught us what love looks like, what commitment means, and how to build something that lasts. Dad, you told me once that you found Mom when she was too sick to stand, that you carried her to bed and stayed. But the truth is you never stopped staying. You have been there for her, for us, for everyone who needed you every single day for 30 years. That is the kind of man you are and the kind of marriage you two have built. We are all blessed to be part of this family." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Nathan pulled Delilah close and kissed her, not caring that they had an audience, not caring about anything except the woman in his arms who had transformed his life 3 decades ago. 30 years, Delilah murmured when they finally pulled apart. "It went so fast." "And I would do it all again in a heartbeat," Nathan said. "Every moment, every challenge, every joy, all of it, as long as it was with you." They danced as the stars came out, moving slowly to music provided by Michael on his guitar and Sarah's husband on a fiddle. Around them, their family celebrated multiple generations united by the love that Nathan and Delilah had built from nothing more than chance and choice. As Nathan held his wife close, swaying to the music under the vast Arizona sky, he thought back to that day by the creek bed. He had been tracking a lost calf and instead found his entire future. Delilah had been lost and alone and dying, and somehow they had saved each other. Not just that first day, but every day since, choosing each other over and over again through everything life threw at them. "What are you thinking about?" Delilah asked, sensing his mood. "About how lucky I am," Nathan said. "About how that scared cowboy who found you by the creek could never have imagined this. All these people, this family, this life. You gave me everything, Delilah." "We gave each other everything," she corrected gently. "I was lost and you found me. But you were alone and I gave you a reason not to be. We built this together, Nathan. Every bit of it." She was right, he knew. It had never been just one of them saving the other. They had been partners from the beginning, building something neither could have created alone. That was the secret, he supposed, the reason they had lasted when so many others had not. They had chosen to stay even when things were hard, even when it would have been easier to walk away. And in that staying, in that daily choice to love and support and fight for each other, they had created something beautiful and lasting. The years continued to roll by with increasing speed. Nathan and Delilah became fixtures in the community. The old couple who had built an empire from nothing and remained devoted to each other through it all. They slowed down more, spending more time on the porch and less time working cattle, but they remained sharp and engaged, offering advice to their children and spoiling their grandchildren. Nathan was 62 when his heart started giving him trouble. Occasional pains in his chest that he tried to hide from Delilah, but she noticed anyway. She insisted he see a doctor in Phoenix, and the diagnosis was what they had feared, a weak heart that was finally wearing out after years of hard labor. The doctor gave him medications and stern instructions to take it easy, but they both knew what it meant. Nathan's time was finite in a way it had not been before, but he did not waste the time he had left on fear or regret. Instead, he made sure to tell everyone he loved exactly how he felt. He spent long afternoons with each of his children, sharing stories and wisdom, and making sure they knew how proud he was of the people they had become. He played with his grandchildren, teaching them to rope and ride just as he had taught their parents, and he spent every possible moment with Delilah, soaking in her presence like a man storing up sunshine before winter. "I am not afraid," he told her one evening as they sat on the porch, wrapped in blankets against the autumn chill. He was 65 now. His breathing sometimes labored and his energy limited, but his mind was still sharp, and his love for her burned as bright as ever. "I have lived a full life, better than I ever deserved. I have loved and been loved. I have children and grandchildren who make me proud every single day. The only hard part is knowing I will have to leave you behind." Delilah's eyes filled with tears, but she did not look away. "Then you had better fight to stay as long as possible. I am not ready to let you go, Nathan Zeller. I will never be ready." "I know, sweetheart. But when the time comes, I need you to promise me something. Promise me you will keep living, really living, not just going through the motions. Our children need you. Our grandchildren need you. And you are still young enough to have years ahead of you. I want you to fill those years with joy, not just grief." "How can I promise that? You are my whole heart." "No," Nathan said gently, taking her hand. "I am part of your heart. But those kids in there, they are part of it too. And there is still so much world out there to explore, so much life to live. Promise me, Delilah. Promise me you will keep going." She cried against his shoulder for a long time before finally whispering her promise. Nathan held her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, feeling the weight of her in his arms. This woman who he had carried to bed 35 years ago. This woman who had chosen him every day since. She was the best thing in a life full of good things. Nathan lasted another 2 years, stubbornly defying the doctor's grim predictions. He was there when Daniel's first grandchild was born, making Nathan and Delilah great-grandparents. He was there for Sarah's 40th birthday celebration and for Michael's wedding to a wonderful woman he had met while traveling. He was there for all the small daily moments that make up a life. Breakfast with Delilah and afternoon rides around the property and evenings on the porch watching the sunset. He died peacefully in his sleep on a warm spring night, with Delilah beside him and moonlight streaming through the bedroom window. She woke to find him still and cold, his face peaceful, as if he were simply sleeping deeply. She did not cry at first, just laid her head on his chest and listened to the silence where his heartbeat used to be. The funeral was enormous, people coming from all over the territory to pay their respects to the man who had touched so many lives. Nathan was buried on a hill overlooking the ranch, the land he had worked and loved for over 40 years. The entire family gathered around as the casket was lowered into the ground, and Delilah stood dry-eyed and straight-backed, honoring her husband's request that she stay strong. But that night, alone in the house that suddenly felt too big and too empty, she finally let herself break. She sobbed into Nathan's pillow, which still carried his scent, and mourned the loss of her partner, her love, her best friend. The pain was enormous, threatening to swallow her whole, but underneath it was something else. Gratitude, joy at having known him, at having loved him and been loved by him for 37 years. Not everyone got that, she knew. Some people lived their whole lives without ever experiencing the kind of love she and Nathan had shared. True to her promise, Delilah did not let grief consume her. She mourned deeply and honestly, but she also kept living. She remained active in the ranch operations, offering guidance to Daniel, who had taken over as primary manager. She spent time with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, passing down stories about their grandfather and the legacy he had left. She traveled a bit, visiting Sarah in Phoenix and Michael on his horse ranch, seeing parts of the country she and Nathan had always talked about exploring together. But every evening, no matter where she was, she would pause at sunset and remember. Remember a young cowboy finding a dying woman by a creek bed. Remember being carried to bed and tended to with gentle hands. Remember falling in love fast and deep and true. Remember a life built from nothing but love and determination and the daily choice to stay. Delilah lived to be 84, sharp-minded and active almost to the end. When her time came, she went peacefully surrounded by family. 3 generations gathered around her bed. Her last words were, "I am coming, Nathan." And she died with a smile on her face, ready to be reunited with the man who had been waiting for her. They buried her beside Nathan on that hill overlooking the ranch. The family stood together, now grown to include great-great-grandchildren, all of them products of the love that had started with a cowboy finding a sick woman and choosing to stay. Daniel spoke at the service, his own hair now fully gray, his voice thick with emotion. "My parents taught us that love is not just a feeling. It is a choice you make every day," he said. "They chose each other every single day for 37 years. And then my mother chose to honor that love by living fully for the 18 years she had without him. They built something beautiful together, something that did not end when they died, but continues in all of us, in the family they created, and the legacy they left. We are all here because a cowboy stopped to help a stranger, because that stranger chose to see past circumstances to the good man beneath, and because they both had the courage to build a life on that foundation. That is what we honor today, not just their deaths, but the love that continues in all of us." The sun set behind the mountains as the service concluded, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson and purple, the same colors that had marked so many of Nathan and Delilah's evenings together. And if you believed in such things, you might say their spirits were there on that hill together again at last, watching over the family they had created and the land they had loved. 2 people who had found each other against impossible odds and built something that would last generations, a cowboy and the woman he carried to bed, who stayed not just through one long feverish night but through every day after, building a love story for the ages under the vast Arizona sky.